What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if you're enjoying the content here on my channel, then make sure you hit the like button and make sure you hit subscribe so you can help decide what direction the content on my channel goes in the foreseeable future. So The Flash it's really the best thing come out of DC Rebirth, to be honest. I mean, I love what Joshua Williamson is doing with the Flash line of stories. And the reason why is because it's just fun. Like, it's just good old-fashioned fun. And in the end, that's what comics are supposed to be. I mean, I love great storytelling. I love stories that are these huge, grandiose epics that stretch on, and it takes 3 years for the whole story to come to its fruition. I do love those. But what I also love are just these quick little fun stories. And this is a quick little 4-issue series. I mean, it's not even the biggest thing in the world. It's just a fun little get together with the Flash and his rogues. Now, in truth, this was kind of a necessity, but the way that Joshua Williamson was playing with the rogues was really absolute genius, to be quite frank. With DC Rebirth, it was basically a jumping off point for a lot of new comic book fans. People who wanted to read Superman, Batman, Detective Comics, Action Comics, Wonder Woman, Batwoman, Batgirl, so on and so forth. A lot of people were wanting to know where to start out at. If you never read Jeff Johns' Green Lantern, then you just jump on with Sam Humphrey's Green Lanterns and you learn about the Green Lantern mythos alongside Jessica Cruz and Simon Baz as they're learning about it. The Flash had to be treated the exact same way, especially with the TV show being what it is, with the Flash expected to be a major character within the realm of the Justice League film. It makes sense that these things would start to sort of, come into a life of their own and give people a jumping off point. But what Joshua Williamson did is immediately with the Flash Rebirth, with the Flash in DC Rebirth, he put the rogues on the back burner, and instead he focused on Godspeed. He focused on small characters like Papercut. He focused on the relationship between the new 52 Wally West and Barry Allen, and he focused on how it is that Barry copes with the return of the pre-new 52 Wally West and the fact that nobody knew that he was gone. And so it really creates this cool scenario, this really, really cool situation here. But what the return of the rogues, what Rogues Reloaded does is it brings the rogues back to the forefront. So the question is, who are the rogues? I mean, that's really kind of the first question we have to ask here. Back when Jeff Johns first took over the Flash series in 2001, I think it was, what ended up happening is Jeff Johns really just kind of looked at the entirety of the Flash landscape, right? And said, okay, look, one of the biggest struggles that the Flash has always had is if Mark Waid wasn't inventing new things like the Speed Force, then the Flash mythos was just kind of starting to drop off because people were seeing the same old, same old. They'd see the Flash go against Captain Cold, and they'd see the Flash go against Weather Wizard, and so on and so forth, and individually they would always be defeated. So Jeff Johns sat down and said, what if they teamed up? What if some of these most notable members of the Flash's Rogues Gallery teamed up and they were basically a team? How would their powers complement one another? What kind of bickering would go on between them? Who would be in charge? Who would want to be in charge but couldn't be in charge? And so what we got were the Rogues. And the Rogues were a beautifully crafted group that would just they'd fight amongst themselves, but they would also end up, going against the Flash. And it created some extremely great storytelling. And because of that, the Rogues became a hallmark of the Flash mythos, a mainstay of the Flash mythos. And so I think you'd be hard pressed to find anybody who would be like, yeah, the Rogues suck, the team should be broken up. I think a lot of Flash fans would say the Rogues are amazing and they have to stay together. And so what happened here, or at least what goes on with this particular story, is we basically see the Rogues returning to the forefront. Because keep in mind, during the story arc Lightning Strikes Twice, the story arc about Godspeed, when the experiment took place and all these people in Central City basically developed the powers of the Flash, the Rogues just kind of bailed out. They were like, time to go, and they pretty much split, and so the result is that now they're back here again. And the cool thing is that Barry Allen gives us this little bit of a tour. He talks about villains like Papercut. He talks about some of these small-time guys that he's basically taken out and he's put in Iron Heights Penitentiary. And that was the goal of Joshua Williamson. Joshua Williamson was like, well, since the Rogues are out of the picture, let's introduce a few small people here and there. Let's introduce Papercut. Let's introduce some small-time guys. And if fans like them, we'll keep them. And if they don't, then we'll just have them sent off to Iron Heights Penitentiary and they'll never be seen or heard from again. But Barry Allen also talks about, in the back of his mind, he was always concerned about the Rogues' return. He was always worried about the fact that the Rogues would come back. And we knew they would. I mean, we as readers knew that it was only a matter of time before the Rogues made their return. And when they did, the question would be, how is it going to happen and what's going to take place when it does? And so Barry Allen really just kind of goes on this quest, this journey, so to speak, to basically try to uncover the information on where the Rogues might have gone to. And of course, it starts with the most logical place, known associates, people who knew the members of the Rogues, whether they were former teammates, whether they were people that knew the Rogues before they became bad guys, whatever the case may be. But this ultimately brings Barry Allen directly into contact with a woman who was really a very focal figure in the life of Captain Cold and Golden Glider and so on and so forth. And so really, Lisa Snart, more or less. And so what ends up happening here is Barry's basically told about the idea when it came to Leonard Snart and Lisa Snart, that they basically took up, or at least they spent a lot of time with their grandfather at his business called Polar Ice. It was the one place they felt safe. And the reason why why was because Leonard and Lisa's parents were very brutal. They were very cruel, or at least the father seemed to be very cruel. And there's some indication here that maybe there was some measure of abuse with regards to the kind of things that they endured. But the fact remains that in polar ice is where they felt the most safe. And so it immediately dawns on Barry Allen, well, that's what where their base of operations may be. If Leonard Snart, if Captain Cold is the leader of the Rogues, then of course he would have his base of operations in the one place he feels safe. What we're going to end up finding out here, though, is this is actually a ruse. This is actually a trap, and it's extremely well done the way it's put together. When Barry Allen arrives in the polar ice, when he arrives inside this building, the first thing he notices is it looks like they just vanished into thin air, like they just immediately took off. The place still looks like they could easily come back any moment. I mean, there's cards on the table, there's money, it looks like they're in the middle of a card game, there's pictures of the Flash, them doing their research, so on and so forth. But as he's going through and he's looking at blueprints for a gun that Captain Cold had perfected, what ends up happening is he basically triggers a booby trap that was left behind by heat wave, which basically detonates the entirety of the polar ice building, seeming as though it was intending to kill Barry Allen in the process. Now, of course, Barry's able to survive the explosion just because of the fact that he can vibrate himself through physical objects and essentially make himself intangible so the explosion wouldn't affect him. But what ends up happening is that as he's leaving, one of the billboards has a camera inside of it, and the camera is being monitored by the Rogues. And this is when they say, this is our chance to make our move. This is our chance to show the Flash what it is that we're about. And that's why I love this, because this story has really has kind of like an Ocean's 11 feel to it. It feels like George Clooney, Brad Pitt, Julia Roberts, Matt Damon, all these guys really kind of banded together, Don Cheadle, Bernie Mac, so on and so forth. It's I guess Carl Reiner. It's a great, almost like a heist story. And that's why I like this, is because what ends up happening is the plans of the Rogues, as Barry Allen saw them, basically leads him to Corto Maltese. And the idea is that the Rogues are basically going to be stealing a statue made of pure gold, a statue of Mercury that's made from gold and jewels, and is the most prized piece in Corto Maltese. And so the idea is that if they were going to commit a crime, they're going to commit a heist. It'd be the perfect heist to commit. And so the result is that once he gets in there, or at least almost immediately before he arrives on the scene, of course the Rogues break in. And it's so cool to see this because they're all using their powers, and it really kind of highlights how the Rogues function together, Mirror Master, and so on and so forth. And they're all able to really pose a legitimate challenge to Barry Allen when he arrives on the scene, but only insofar that, it really kind of takes him by surprise. But then he, of course, goes through and presumably defeats each individual member of the team. But when Leonard Snart goes to take a hostage, of course, Barry Allen rescues the girl. But then he also realizes that this gun that Leonard Snart's holding is in his right hand. Leonard Snart is left-handed. And this is when Barry Allen realizes this is not Leonard Snart. And what we end up finding out is that the Rogues were never here. The only person who was here was Mirror Master. They were basically mirror duplicates. They were mirror copies. And this is when Barry Allen realizes he was tricked. Not only that, if Barry Allen was tricked and he has to go against these, mirror copies of himself, which he's of course successfully able to take out, it also begs the question, if he was basically here and the Rogues were not, then where are the Rogues? And that's when it dawns on him, the Rogues hit Central City already. That was the goal. The goal was to get the Flash out of Central City so they could basically make the ultimate heist. They could make the ultimate hit. They could take out Central City without the Flash ever being there. And this is so genius. This is so smart, because whenever it came to the Rogues, one of the things that was always kind of funny is the Rogues would just be like, okay, let's get him this time, guys. And it would always end up in a fight, and the Rogues would have to fight against Flash, and their whole goal would be defeated. The question here that we would always have to pose is, well, why didn't the Rogues just ever get the Flash out of Central City and then rob the place? And that's exactly what they do. They get the Flash out of Central City, and they just rob the joint. I mean, they rob it clean, and it's so cool because what they do in the process, or at least what Heatwave does in the process, is he basically kind of leaves his mark. He's, sort of torches things and so on and so forth. But this really proves to be the downfall of the group. The reason why I say that is because, again, we had talked about how the Rogues constantly fought amongst themselves, how the Rogues constantly fought amongst each other, how they always argued with each other, so on and so forth, where Mick Rory was a guy who essentially engineered the deaths of his family by, being a pyromaniac and setting, burning the house down. He basically shows back up again to kind of say, one final send-off, to say goodbye one last time, because the Rogues intend to leave Central City behind forever. And so the Flash immediately picks up that if there were going to be any place that Heatwave would go to, it would be to his old family home. But what Heatwave does is he basically uses this as a trick. Instead of simply saying goodbye to his family and kind of having a sentimental moment, he's lured the Flash here. And his goal is to take out Barry Allen. And that's why the plans of the
rogues always come crashing down because someone breaks formation. Someone does something they're not supposed to. Their own selfish ambitions get the best of them, or maybe the selfish ambitions of all the members of the rogues get the best of them. But there's always that one, hitch in the giddy up, that one person that screws it all up. In this instance, it's Heatwave. Because of the fact that Heatwave, allowed his own blind ambition, his desire to kill Barry Allen, get the better of him. Of course, Barry Allen, faces off against him, but Heatwave actually seems to take him out. And the indication here is that Heatwave defeated Barry Allen. Well, of course, we know that would not be the case. And if Heatwave did defeat Barry Allen, it certainly wouldn't be by something as simple as just a flamethrower, that managed to subdue him. It would have to be something much more grandiose, because in truth, it would just be disappointing. It would be like the death of Superman, where somebody just shot him with a sniper rifle with a green kryptonite bullet. It'd be the most lackluster, anticlimactic story ever. So again, this is kind of Joshua Williamson messing around with us a little bit, saying, hey, look guys, you guys know what's going on. I mean, you guys know how the game is played. You guys have been reading comic books long enough. You guys know that when a character is defeated, it gets done a certain way. We're not doing it that way. Barry Allen's not defeated. And so of course, what ends up happening here, what we learn is that Barry Allen basically followed Heatwave back to the location of the rogues. And Captain Cold catches onto this in an instant. I mean, he catches onto it right off the bat. He's just like, dude, there's no way you defeated the Flash. I promise you, Heatwave, there's no way you successfully defeated the Flash. If you did, it was a miracle and God is looking out for you. But of course, what most likely happened is the Flash faked his own death and he followed you here. And that's exactly what happened. From here, it's just an exercise in futility. I mean, the rogues try to take out the Flash as best they can. There's no contest. There's no contest to be had here. But that's not what Joshua Williamson is looking for. One of the things that I think that Joshua Williamson is so good at when it comes to writing comic books is building up to something bigger. It's building to a bigger picture. It's saying, hey guys, here's this event here, and here's that event there, and there's that event over there. Between these three stories, there's going to be something left behind. In the first story, it was Godspeed. In the second story, it was, potential secondary villains. In this story right here, it is the rogues. And so what he's basically doing here is he's setting up the idea that the rogues are going to are very much going to stay a part of the Flash mythos. But what we also end up finding out here is that where Captain Cold had initially used his intelligence to sort of break down and create a gun of his own that could manipulate the Cold, what he also says he's done, he was watching Central City, watching the events unfold when, the whole situation unfolded with regards to everybody getting Flash powers. And what he did is he duplicated that experiment, but then he weaponized it. And essentially what he's done is he's created the Black Ice Gun. And the Black Ice Gun is designed for no other purpose than to neutralize the Flash in his entirety. And it's actually really cool to see, because what this does is it basically works in conjunction with his ice powers. He can freeze the Flash, and then Barry Allen can't vibrate himself out of it. It's not really like a kryptonite for Barry Allen so much as it is a way to sort of create a barrier between Barry and his own powers, kind of reduce his connection to the Speed Force. And that's the coolest thing about that, is because in the end, it's always Barry Allen and his connection to the Speed Force. And I'm glad that's not lost on Joshua Williamson, right? I mean, it's a very easy weakness to exploit if you know how. Barry's connection to the Speed Force is a rope. All you have to do is get the right kind of knife, you could cut that rope. And Barry Allen is just a man who can be killed in any conventional way. But if you have someone who can manipulate that rope, if you have somebody who can sort of mess with the connection a little bit, while it wouldn't necessarily kill Barry Allen, it would weaken him in an extreme sense. Now, of course, what Barry Allen does is, he ends up defeating Captain Cold. And the only way that he does is to really sort of vibrate himself or move himself in a way where it basically heats up the gun itself. And so it's almost like creating an electric feedback to the gun, essentially disabling it for a temporary amount of time. But what it does is it allows Barry to basically overpower Captain Cold. And this is why I say Joshua Williamson is always building up for something bigger. Joshua Williamson is always building up for something better. Now, where the other rogues step in and they try to subdue Barry Allen, they try to basically take him out, in the end, it doesn't work. What ends up happening here is that when he had essentially defeated Captain Cold, that he had also kind of, short-circuited the Black Ice Gun. And it basically just kind of sent out this shockwave that more or less knocked out the rogues. But the reason why I say this is a story where Joshua Williamson is always building up to something bigger is because back at Iron Heights Penitentiary, the rogues are basically thrown into Gen Pop. But what also ends up happening is Paper Cut and a few of these small-time villains are sort of thrown into this general communal area. And when they get there, Captain Cold says, Barry Allen told me that I could be capable of so much more if I put my engineer, my intelligence to good use. Well, that's what we're going to do. I'm effectively going to be the kingpin of Iron Heights Penitentiary. Now, this begs some serious questions, and that's why I love this so much, is because now it's not just the rogues. Now it's not just, Golden Glider, and it's not just Weather Wizard, and it's not just Mirror Master, and Heatwave, and Trickster, and Captain Cold. Now it's like Eobard Thawne. Now it is Godspeed. Now it's some of these most notable villains of the Flash's landscape potentially teaming up, all fighting him at the same time. And that could create one hell of a story. So I'm really interested to see what direction things go in from here. But of course, I think the next story going into this immediately deals with like Daniel West, as far as I'm aware, kind of the return of Daniel West, or at the very least, it deals with Daniel West being transferred to Belle Reve, which indicates that Daniel West is kind of going to be shanghaied onto the Suicide Squad, which I'd actually be pretty excited to see. I don't know if he ever was part of the Suicide Squad before, but I'd be curious to see what Daniel West Reverse Flash looks like on the Suicide Squad. I think it'd be kind of cool. But if you guys are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoy this video, make sure you drop a like, and yeah, I will catch you all later. Peace.